Hi everyone, this is Ligita. Welcome to Dart and Flutter series. In this video, let's talk about functions. So, functions are like a block of code which does some kind of task which is given to it. Like if you write the code once in the function, we can just reuse it again and again later on. So what's the use of function? So to avoid the repeating the code or repeating the same lines of code, and second one is like organizing the code, and third is making code easier for others to read or understand if they go through your code, and last is to perform some specific task. So these are the users. Okay, now let's see how can we define and call the function in Dart. So if you already know about JavaScript, usually how do you define the function in JavaScript? We used to have a keyword called function. Then we try to create a function, but in Dart we don't use any kind of a keyword. We usually start creating the function first with the data type, then the function name and a parenthesis which is followed by the curly braces, which it's a block of code that holds here, which does the specific task to us. So let's try to create a function and let's call the function. How do we define the function? As I told, see, we will give a data type because if you return the function, what will be the data that you are returning is very important. If you didn't mention anything, by default the dat will take the return type by seeing what is the return you have. What is the return that the function is doing. So let's write a function name called. Let's give a function name called greet. Which is followed by parenthesis and a curly braces. The main reason the parenthesis is given is you can pass the parameters. When you call the function, you can pass the arguments. So by this way, you can reuse the function multiple times just by passing the parameters. Okay, by passing the arguments. The next is, see, if I try to print a statement called hello, and observe this function, what I have written, I have given the function name, parenthesis and a curly braces inside that, a block of code that I want to execute, right? So if I don't give a data type, the what is the thing it is returning? It is returning nothing, which means this function is like a no parameter. We are not passing any parameter nor no return type. There is no return type. We are just printing the things. We are not returning anything. So by default, the return type will be a void. So even if you don't write it in specific, it will take it as a void. The next thing is, how do we call this function? How to call the function? By its name. The name we have given is greet, and I try to call this function. If I run or hit a button run, so the output should print as hello. Yeah, here is the output hello. So what did we understand till now is how do we define the function. So when it comes to a Dart, we usually define the function by its name, parenthesis followed by the curly braces. Inside sometimes we can return the something in the function, or we can just print something like it's without a return. So this is the example of no parameter and no return type. Okay, which is like a void. Okay, the next is, let's create a function which has a parameters. As I told, we can once we define the function, we can reuse it multiple times because by passing the parameters. Okay, let's take an example called, let's create a function that has a parameters. Let's take void greet, which takes a parameter, usually parenthesis. Inside parenthesis, we usually define the parameters. Let's give a parameters a name. Let's give a username. It's like a variable you are giving. Okay, it should always have a data type, and the username usually will be in the string. So what you'll pass, the parameter will have two things: the name of the parameter, it's like a variable, and a data type of it. The next is a curly braces, which will have the code, and let's print the username that we are getting. And in this concept, we are trying to print the username. Okay, we are having this string called hello, and here the concept comes called as string interpolation. In the last video we already learned about this. So when you want to include a variable inside the string, we usually use a $sign, then we use the variable name. Okay, and let's end the statement with a semicolon. The next thing, we have to call this function. How do you call this function? We have to write a name of the function, and see, it is throwing it is giving a red mark down here. It is stating that we have to pass a parameter, and it have to be string. So let's pass a parameter called Sarah. It's a name of a user. If I try to run the code, the output expected is hello with the username. So what we can do, I can take the same function and call it for the different person name. So what will be the output? Hello Sarah, hello Alex. So by this way, I'm just calling, I've just defined the function words, but I'm calling it like multiple times. I'm not repeating the 3 lines of code again and again. So this is how it makes it reusable. Okay, now let's see the function that returns the value. See, as for now we have seen the function that has no return type, right? So let's see if there's some return types. So let's not start with the data type. Let's start with the function name. Let's take the greet only as example, as a parameters. So let's say it has a parameters called as string, which is an username, and a block of code that is wrapped with the curly braces. And we want to return what? We want to return a text called hello, and also the variable should be included, that is a username, and end with the semicolon. See, what we are doing, we are returning a value, and the value we are returning here is a string. It is a string, right? Do you guys agree it is a string? Yes, it's a string. Then what will be the data type of this function? It will be the string. Clear? When it is returning something, how do you call the function? It is super simple. Just come inside the main. Inside the main only, I told you in the first class only, whatever the code it runs, when the moment we hit run, it search for the main method, the main function, and whatever inside the main will be run. Okay, so let's call the function inside the main greet, and we have to pass a variable string. We have to pass a value string called, let's pass it as Ligita, and end the statement. And the next thing is, see, we are returning the value, we are getting the value. In order to see that in the console, we have to make sure that we are printing this. Just write print and paste the same thing, and end this with the semicolon, and try to run the same program. So the output will be hello with the name or the value that you have passed, that is Ligita. See, here we got the output. So this is the one of the example, that function that returns the value. So it is returning a string, so the data type will be string. If I try to make this as int, if I see, there will be an error. See, because the return type and the data type that we have given to for the function is different. This is what they meant. Okay, now let's learn about something called as arrow function. So this is the normal function that we have defined earlier, right? So it's a normal function. So let's take it here and bring it down here. It's a normal function. And how do we create an arrow function? Firstly, what is arrow function? Arrow function is like a simple syntax, and it's like a shortcut or a shorthand for the function that we are defining. Clear? Why do we use this arrow function? It will be used in between of some UIs, because it returns a single statement, and it is not as much as complex. It doesn't want to have this curly braces and all. It just returns a single expression. So what we'll do, just come, how do we create arrow function? It is clear as the name suggests, arrow. So instead of writing the curly braces, we'll just replace it with the arrow. So we'll write the same thing, a string. There's no difference. Only the difference is we are adding an arrow here, string, and let's name this function as greet2. Okay, we can't give the same name, you guys know. Then have a parameter called string and a user name. And instead of a curly braces, what we'll do, we'll just write the arrow. And the second thing, it automatically returns. You don't have to write a keyword called return. It automatically returns. So I have to just write hello with the variable name called user name, and end the statement with the semicolon. And we have to run this, right? Just print and write greet2 with the name called Sarah and try to print this. Okay, when I run this code, the output will be hello Likita and hello Sarah. And see here, if you observe between two things, between the normal function and the arrow function just takes a one line of code, whereas in the normal function it takes like a 3 lines of code. It's about the complexity, it's about how easy you can use the function, and these functions can be used in between the UI if you want to manipulate the UI. Okay, and also when you write the arrow function, it automatically returns. You don't have to write a keyword called return. So this is the benefit of using the arrow function, and we tend to use it more in the further videos also. Okay, we already learned about the parameters, right? So let's take an example of greet only. Let's take an example of greet, which instead of passing a one parameter, let's try to pass a 2 parameters. Example like username, which is a string, and let's add one more parameter called an int, that is an age. And let's try to return the statement with a string called hello with the name of the user, it is username, with an age variable, and end the statement. Clear? We know this. We have what we are doing. We have created a function greet, which is taking 2 parameters. One is a username, another one is age, and it is trying to print it. Right? We are just returning it so that in the main function we can print it whenever you want it. Okay, let's say there is a situation where compulsory I'll get a username, but there are chances that I don't want to pass age of the username. Or let's say input where I get only the username, and from the form I am not getting the age because I didn't make it as option. I didn't make it as required. So let's say the age is not been passed, or sometime it is like null. In that time we can use the optional position. It's saying this parameter can be an optional. So if you want to make this as optional, just wrap this inside the square bracket. When the moment you wrap, it will give an error called it can be null. The age could be null. When sometimes age could be null, what do I mean is, see, how do I call this function? I write this and I try to make this as print. Inside the print, I'll write greet, and I have to pass 2 things. One is a username and second one is an age. Okay, sometime I don't want to pass age. That time this variable could be null, right? So that's why it is throwing an error called it could be null. This variable can end up as null. So in the last video I talked about null. If you want to make this variable null, you can just write a question mark saying this variable could end up null. Okay, this solves an error. Fine. See, in the first example, let's pass an age of 20, and in second example, let's only pass the name, not an age. Okay, in both statement we can pass the thing. See, it is not throwing any error even if I don't pass the second parameter, because we told that it's an optional parameter, which means that either you can have that parameter or not. The output will be in the first statement both the hello Sarah and the age. In the second, the age will have the null. Clear? you are making one parameter optional, and when you does that as a optional, and if you don't pass it here also, it doesn't throw any error because we already told this could be an option. So I think you're clear with the concept. Let's move on to the next concept, that is as a named parameters. Okay, let's again create a what do you call the function that passes the parameters, and also always remember, so let's first create and let me explain after that. Greet, same example. Okay, we want a parameters called a string called a username, and let it be an int with the age, and let it return an string which says user name as username, that is the variable, and the age as the age, and end the statement with the semicolon or else it throws an error. So here if you could see, sometimes when you try to make a function, it could have maybe have more than 2 parameters, right? It could have 5 parameters, it could have 10 parameters, and if you don't remember the what do you call the order of the each parameter you are sending, it could create an issue. Example, let's imagine the first order is, first you have to pass an argument that should be a username, and second should be an age, right? Let's imagine you forgot and you tend to first send the age and username. Example, let's call this a greet, a function you are calling, and it is returning something. So make sure if you want to see that in a console, just print it in the console and end this statement. And inside greet we want 2 things, one is an age and one is an what do you call the name. So this is the thing. See, when I do this, it throws an error because the order of the parameters you have included here and the order of the argument that you are sending here is different. We want a first thing called a Sarah and second thing called an age. Okay, if this could be a problem, if you forget about the order of the parameter, that time we tend to use, or more we use, named parameters. What is named parameters? Will give, whenever you are passing a value or argument, you name the values so that it doesn't end up with the errors like this, or the order dislocation, or order error like this. Okay, how do I create a name parameter? First thing, I have to wrap the whole parameters in the curly braces. Okay, the moment I do, I get an error saying that the username it cannot be a null. So I can do 2 things. I can make this as null or I can make this as required. Let's make this as a required. I can just use a required keyword, and second, either we can make the age also a required, or I can make this as an optional. It could be null. Sometimes age could be null. Age is not given. Let's say if that was the condition, if that was the state, let's make this as this. The second thing, how do I solve this error is, so how do we solve this error is, we already given a specific name to each variable, right? So let's use the name to that. So we want age to be 20 and we want a user name as Sarah. So the moment you do, the error will be gone. So what it is stating is the named parameters. Each parameter will be given a name, right? So by using that name, we are tend to pass the value. So the confusion of the order won't be there anymore. And whenever you want to use the name parameters, the whole parameter should be enclosed or wrapped within this curly braces. Clear? I think you got the concept of this. So let's define one more thing, that is called default parameter values. What is default parameters value? Let's imagine I always wanted this required, so let's remove this and let's state the username could also be a null. It probably could also be null. And if someone doesn't pass the username, what will be the output? It will be usually end up to be a null, right? As expected, the output will be the username null and the age will be 20. So let's say if we didn't get any username, I want to keep it as like a default. I want to make that as a default name called guest. So what I can do, I can just come here and I can define it here or give a default parameter value. I'm giving a default value to it. I'm saying if I try to run, if there is no name passed as argument, just give a default name that is guest. So the output will be name, username, the username will be in guest and the age will be in the 20 that we have passed here. So this is the concept of default parameter value. You are giving a or you are setting a default value. Let's say if I give an username as in let's say instead of I'll give it as Sarah only. So the output here will be hello Sarah and age will be 20 because we have passed the parameter Sarah. We have passed the parameter username. If this was not there, we can take this a default value. This is all about the default parameter values. Okay, the next concept is callback function. So what is this callback function? As we told, we already have familiar with the function called, the function that passes parameters, right? Let's take an example like let's say greet only, who cares? So if this function pass the parameters and if that parameter is another function, if this is the function that you are passing as a parameter and if you are returning the same thing, the same function, then this is called as callback function. So what is callback function? You are passing the function as the parameters and you are trying to return something from that function. So you got the concept. The parameter here is another function. You are using a function and you are passing a function and you are printing something. So let's take an example. So let's create a function. Let's create a function called a greet. Okay, just make sure it is in the small case. Okay, it's followed by the parenthesis curly braces and the parameter that we are taking is we want a parameter called a function. First the function. So let's give the data type, that is data type is a function only, and let's give a name to the function. Let it be a callback. Okay, so when it's done, let's do one thing. We'll just print it as the initial function, the initial function that takes function as the argument. Okay, it takes the function as the argument here. When you pass, it takes as function as argument. I think you're clear about it. So, and we'll try to call the same function. So after the printing this, we'll call the function that you have passed. Okay, so how do we call this function? Same thing, we'll go inside the main, make sure this is printed. So whatever you have, no, that's not printed because it is not returning anything which is printing. Just use greet. Inside that we have to pass a function, and we can either write a function or directly we can give a function called is done, and we can write a function inside it which says something like, let's print it. Let's print hello, it's me, hello, it's me, and end the statement, and make sure you end the statement here also. So what did we do? Function, okay, sorry, you can't name the things. You can just pass the function because this is named as the function, and I'll in the next in few seconds we'll learn about the function as variable. That's where this concept will come. So if I try to run, what will happen? The greet will be first called. When the moment it goes, the function this will be passed here. and the first it will print the initial value. Then when you call this function, inside this function, what is the thing? We have to pass a print called hello itself. So you are getting the point. You are trying to pass another function as the parameters. So this is mainly used, or you can see all this in the on click of a button or on tap of something. So these are like the action types where you pass the callback functions like a form or something. So you'll generally see this in the UIs of button and all. And the next concept is function as the variable. Function as variables. So let's remove this. Okay, what is this function as a variable? We are just creating a variable and we are storing the function. So variable are basically that only, right? It mainly used to store something. It could be function, it could be array, it could be list, it could be object, anything. So let's create a function, the variable called greet. And in this moment, when you want to create a function, automatically the variable name is considered as a function name. So you don't have to write a function in name, because we have already given a name to it to identify that. So let's write a parenthesis, curly braces, and we'll try to print something like function as variable, and end the statement, make sure end the function statement too. And how do we call this? We just have to write a greet, because it is not returning anything and it is printing some string. So run the program. When you run the program, you'll get an output called function as the variable. Done. So this is all about a function. So in the further classes, we'll learn about classes, interfaces, and many more basic things about Dart. Thank you.